Lifting his hands and shining arms to heaven, he moaned, "Oh, pardon me, Father Linnaeus, I have done wrong, but pity me, I pray, and save me from this curse that looks so fair." How patient are the gods! Bacchus forthwith, because King Midas had confessed his fault, restored him and annulled the promise given, annulled the favor granted, and he said, "That you may not be always cased in gold, which you unhappily desired, depart to the stream that flows by the great town of Sardis, and upward trace its waters that they glide past Lydian heights, until you find their source. Then, where the spring leaps out from mountain rock, plunge head and body in the snowy foam. At once the flood will take away your curse." King Midas did as he was told, and plunged beneath the water at the river's source, and the gold virtue granted by the god as it departed from his body tinged the stream with gold, and even to this hour adjoining fields, touched by this ancient vein of gold, are hardened where the river flows, and colored with the gold that Midas left. Abhorring riches, he inhabited the woods and fields, and followed Pan, who dwells always in mountain caves. But still obtuse remained, from which his foolish mind again, by an absurd decision, harmed his life. He followed Pan up to the lofty Mount Tmolus, which from its great height looks far across the sea. Steep and erect it stands between great Sardis and the small Hypaepa. While Pan was boasting there to the mountain nymphs of his great skill in music, and while he was warbling a gay tune upon the reeds, cemented with soft wax, in his conceit he dared to boast to them how he despised Apollo's music when compared with his. At last, to prove it, he agreed to stand against Apollo in a contest which it was agreed should be decided by Tmolus as their umpire. This old god sat down on his own mountain, and first eased his ears of many mountain-growing trees. Oak leaves were wreathed upon his azure hair, and acorns from his hollow temples hung. First to the shepherd god Tmolus spoke, "My judgment shall be yours with no delay." Pan made some rustic sounds on his rough reeds, delighting Midas with his uncouth notes, for Midas chanced to be there when he played. When Pan had ceased, divine Tmolus turned to Phoebus, and the forest likewise turned just as he moved. Apollo's golden locks were richly wreathed with fresh Parnassian laurel. His robe of Tyrian purple swept the ground. His left hand held his lyre, adorned with gems and Indian ivory. His right hand held the plectrum. As an artist he stood there before Tmolus, while his skilful thumb, touching the strings, made charming melody. Delighted with Apollo's artful touch, Tmolus ordered Pan to hold his reeds, excelled by beauty of Apollo's lyre. That judgment of the sacred mountain god pleased all those present, all but Midas, who, blaming Tmolus, called the award unjust. The Delian god forbids his stupid ears to hold their native human shape, and drawing them out to a hideous length, he fills them with grey hairs, and makes them both unsteady, wagging at the lower part, still human, only this one part condemned. Midas had ears of a slow-moving ass. Midas, careful to hide his long ears, wore a purple turban over both, which hid his foul disgrace from laughter. But one day a servant, who was chosen to cut his hair with steel when it was long, saw his disgrace. He did not dare reveal what he had seen, but eager to disclose the secret, dug a shallow hole, and in a low voice told what kind of ears were on his master's head. All this he whispered in the hollow earth he dug, and then buried all he had said by throwing back the loose earth in the hole, so everything was silent when he left. A grove thick set with quivering reeds began to grow there, and when it matured about 12 months after that the servant left, the grove betrayed its planter. For, moved by a gentle south wind, it repeated all the words which he had whispered, and disclosed from earth the secret of his master's ears. His vengeance now complete, Latona's son, born through the liquid air, departed from Tmolus, and then rested on the land of Laomedon, this side the narrow sea dividing Phrygia from the land of Thrace. The promontory of Sigeum, right, and on the left Rheoteum, loftily arise, and at that place an ancient altar had been dedicated to great Jove, the god Panomphaeon. And near that place he saw Laomedon, beginning then to build the walls of famous Troy. He was convinced the task exceeded all the power of man, requiring great resource. Together with the trident-bearing father of the deep, he assumed a mortal form, and those two gods agreed to labor for a sum of gold, and built the mighty wall. But that false king refused all payment, adding perjury to his false bargaining. Neptune, enraged, said, "You shall not escape your punishment." And he drove all his waters high upon the shores of Troy, built there through perfidy. The sad land seemed a sea, the hard-earned wealth of all its farmers was destroyed and overwhelmed by furious waves. This awful punishment was not enough. The daughter of the king was soon required as food for a sea monster. Hesione was chained to rugged rocks. But Hercules delivered from all harm the royal maid, and justly he demanded of the king, her father, payment of the promised steeds. But that perfidious king refused to keep his promise. Hercules, enraged because all payment was denied to him for his great service, captured the twice perjured walls of conquered Troy, and as a fair reward he gave Telamon, who fought for him, Hesione, loved daughter of that king. For Peleus had a god as his bride, and he was prouder of his father-in-law than of his grandsire, since not he alone was grandson of the great Jove, but he alone was honored with a goddess for a wife. To Thetis, aged Proteus once had said, "O goddess of the waves, you shall conceive, and you shall be the mother of a youth who by heroic actions will surpass the deeds of his own father, and your son shall be superior to his father's power." So Jupiter, although the flame of love for Thetis burned his breast, would not embrace the lovely daughter of the sea, and urged his grandson Peleus, son of Aeacus, to wed the green-haired maid without delay. There is a curved bay of Haemonia, where like an arch 2 bending arms project out in the waves, as if to form a harbour, but the water is not deep, although enough to hide a shoal of sand. It is a firm shore which will not retain a foot's impression, nor delay the step. No seaweeds grow in that vicinity. There is a grove of myrtle near that place, thick hung with berries blended of twin shades. A cave within the middle of that grove is found, and whether it was formed by art or nature is not known, although it seems a work of art. There Thetis often went, quite naked, seated on her dolphin, which was harnessed. Peleus seized her there when she was fast asleep, and after he had tried to win her by entreaties, while she long continued to resist him, he resolved to conquer her by violence, and seized her neck with both arms. She resorted then to all her usual art, and often changed her shape as it was known, so that he failed in his attempt. At first she was a bird, but while she seemed a bird he held her fast, and then she changed herself to a large tree, and Peleus clung with ardor to the tree. Her third disguise was a spotted tigress, which frightened him so that he lost his hold. Then as he poured wine on the heaving sea, he prayed unto the sea-green gods, and gave them sacrifice of sheep entrails and smoke of frankincense. He ceased not till at last the prophet of Carpathia, as he rose up from a deep wave, said, "Hark unto me, O son of Aeacus. You shall have the bride your heart desires when she at rest lies sleeping in the cool wave. You must bind her while she is unwary with strong cords and complicated bonds, and never let her arts deceive you when she imitates 100 varied forms, but hold her fast, whatever she may seem, until she shall at length assume the shape she had at first." So Proteus cautioned him, and hid his face beneath the waves as his last words were said. Now Titan was descending, and the pole of his bright chariot as it downward bent illuminated the Hesperian main, and at that time the lovely Nereid, Thetis, departing from her ocean wave, entered the cavern for desired repose. Peleus was waiting there. Immediately, just as he seized upon the virgin's limbs, she changed her shape and persevered until convinced she could not overcome his hold, for her 2 arms were forced apart. She groaned and said, "You could not overcome me in this way, but some divinity has given you the power." Then she appeared as Thetis, and when Peleus saw her now deprived of all deceptions, he embraced her and was father of the great Achilles. End of Book 11, Part 1.